You know that feeling when you're standing in a room full of people, laughing with friends, maybe even at a party where everyone's having the time of their life, and yet, you feel completely invisible. Like you're looking through glass at a world you're not really part of? Well, here, the unsettling truth. That feeling isn't in your head, it's real, it's measurable, and it's happening to more people right now than ever before. The question isn't whether you're imagining it, the question is, why does it happen, and more importantly, what can you actually do about it? Stay with me for the next 15 minutes, because we're about to unlock something that's been hiding in the shadows of modern psychology. Something that explains why feeling invisible in a crowded room is one of the most painful experiences you can have. Let me start with something that might sound contradictory. Loneliness is not about being alone. In fact, you can feel the most isolated while surrounded by people who care about you. This distinction is crucial, and it's scientifically backed. According to research conducted at multiple universities, loneliness actually arises from what psychologists call a discrepancy between your desired social connection and your actual social connection with others. Think about that for a second. It's not the physical presence of people that matters. It's whether you feel genuinely known and understood by those people. A landmark study published in peer-reviewed journals found that nearly 11% of all people report feelings of loneliness at any given time. But here, where it gets more interesting, this number has been steadily climbing since the 1980s, even as we've become more connected through technology. The research is clear on this. Loneliness differs fundamentally from solitude. You can be perfectly happy alone, but when you're lonely, you're actively craving the social connection you feel is missing. It's that craving, that desperate sense of wanting to be seen, that creates the emotional pain, and this pain isn't just psychological. Studies show that loneliness triggers real physiological responses in your body. Lonely individuals show increased cardiovascular activation, a major risk factor for chronic heart disease. We're talking about actual physical health consequences from feeling invisible. What's particularly important to understand is something called the invisibility trap. Psychologists have identified that people who are lonely are less likely to notice when others are showing them commitment or affection. It's as if your brain has developed a filter that screens out the positive signals. You become hypersensitive to rejection while being completely blind to acceptance. Imagine living in a world where all the love being directed toward you is happening on a frequency you can no longer hear. That's the reality for someone caught in the invisibility cycle. So what actually causes this feeling of invisibility? Where does it come from? The answer is more complex than you might think, but research has identified several primary pathways. First, there's what we call childhood neglect. One of the most striking discoveries in developmental psychology is that when children grow up without consistent emotional nurturing, they internalize a fundamental belief that they are not worth being seen. Imagine a child going through her day, school, homework, meals, social interactions, without a caring adult consistently reflecting back to her, "You matter, you're worthy of attention." Over time, that child develops what therapists call an internal wound. She learns to hide parts of herself. She learns to be small, and here's the critical part. This pattern follows her into adulthood even if she later builds healthy relationships. A part of her nervous system is still operating from that old programming, still waiting to be truly witnessed. The second major cause is social rejection in childhood. If you were bullied, excluded, or labeled as different, you likely responded by burying parts of yourself. Maybe you were called a show-off or a teacher's pet. Maybe you were targeted for how you looked or for being different. As a survival mechanism, and this is actually brilliant evolutionary thinking, you became what psychologists call a chameleon. You shape-shifted into whoever you thought would be accepted. But here's the problem: the parts of you that got buried, those are still in there, and they're still hungry to be acknowledged and seen. The third cause is what we call toxic relationships, and this one is particularly damaging because it happens in real time. Psychologists have identified that narcissism, the tendency to be completely self-focused and unable to genuinely empathize with others, directly creates invisibility in relationships. People with narcissistic traits have enormous difficulty stepping outside of their own reality to truly see another person. Instead, they reshape reality to be about themselves. If you're in a relationship with someone like this, whether it's a romantic partner, parent, or close friend, your feeling of invisibility isn't a perception problem, it's a reality. You literally are not being seen because the other person lacks the psychological capacity for empathy and genuine curiosity about your inner world. But here, where it gets even more interesting, research from the American Psychological Association shows that loneliness also creates a kind of feedback loop. When you feel invisible, you actually start to withdraw from relationships. This is called social avoidance. You pull back, you stop trying, and ironically, this makes you even more invisible. It's a trap, a vicious cycle where the symptom becomes the cause and the cause becomes the symptom. Let's talk about what's happening in your brain when you feel invisible, because this is where psychology gets really fascinating. Neuroscience research has revealed that loneliness literally changes how your brain processes emotions and social information. When you feel chronically unseen or invisible, your brain develops distorted expectations about social interactions. Psychologists have found that lonely people show atypical emotional processing. In plain language, your brain becomes worse at accurately reading social situations. If someone gives you a compliment, your brain filters it. If someone shows you affection, your brain questions it. You've essentially installed a skepticism filter that protects you from potential rejection by disbelieving positive signals. There's also something called emotion perception bias that develops in lonely individuals. Research using brain imaging has shown that people experiencing chronic loneliness have altered patterns of emotional reactivity. They're more sensitive to threat signals and less sensitive to reward signals. Again, this makes evolutionary sense. Your brain is trying to protect you, but in the modern world, this protective mechanism becomes a prison. You're constantly in a state of low-level threat detection, always scanning for rejection, always expecting to be overlooked. This altered brain chemistry has real consequences. People with chronic loneliness show impaired executive function. That's your ability to plan, organize, and make good decisions. They experience accelerated cognitive decline compared to people with strong social connections. And perhaps most troublingly, loneliness is correlated with both depression and anxiety disorders. The CDC has designated social isolation and loneliness as serious threats to public mental and physical health, comparable to smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. What's crucial to understand is that this isn't weakness. This isn't your fault. This is neurobiology. Your brain is responding to a perceived threat. Invisibility, the way it was designed to respond. But because that threat is chronic rather than acute, your nervous system gets stuck in a state of hypervigilance. You're exhausted from scanning for danger. You're depleted from defending against rejection. And all the while, people around you are likely trying to reach you, but you're too defended to feel it. Now let's address something that might seem paradoxical. We're talking about feeling invisible and unseen, but there's another side of this coin. What happens when you become too transparent? When you've been invisible for so long that you stop revealing anything of yourself? Here, what research on self-disclosure tells us. Self-disclosure, the act of revealing personal information, feelings, and vulnerabilities to others, is absolutely critical for creating genuine connection and intimacy. Studies show that effective disclosure contributes to greater intimacy, trust, and closeness. In fact, low levels of self-disclosure are directly associated with loneliness and health problems like chronic stress. But here's the trap. When you've learned through experience, either in childhood or in toxic relationships, that revealing yourself leads to rejection or judgment, you stop disclosing. You become transparent in a different way. You're physically present but emotionally invisible. You show up, but you don't really show up. And the painful irony is that this protective strategy backfires spectacularly. The very thing that would allow you to be truly seen, vulnerability and authentic self-disclosure, is exactly what you've learned to avoid. Psychologists have identified that the decision to disclose is actually quite rational. We weigh the risks against the benefits. But when your brain has learned that the risk is rejection or judgment, the cost-benefit analysis becomes paralyzed. You calculate that it's safer to stay hidden, And so you become a phantom in your own relationships, and then you wonder why you feel so alone. What's fascinating is that research on vulnerability shows that authentic self-disclosure is actually a sign of psychological strength, not weakness. People who can reveal their genuine selves, their fears, their struggles, their authentic desires, are showing tremendous courage and emotional maturity. But here's what we don't talk about enough. That kind of vulnerability requires safety. You can't truly be vulnerable with someone who has shown you that they're not safe. And if your history has taught you that people aren't safe, becoming transparent, becoming invisible, feels like the only logical choice. So we've diagnosed the problem. You feel invisible. Your brain has learned to protect you by filtering out connection. Your past has taught you that it's safer to stay hidden. But here's the good news. Psychologists have identified concrete strategies that actually work to break this cycle. The first strategy is what Dr. Alison Cook calls curiosity. When you notice the feeling of invisibility arising, instead of running from it or trying to fix it immediately, you get curious. You ask yourself, when did this start? Was it with me a long time? Who am I with when I feel most invisible? What do I tell myself when this feeling comes up? This isn't about analyzing yourself into submission. It's about gathering information. You're learning the geography of your own emotional landscape. The second strategy is awareness. As you get curious, you become more aware of patterns, and the research is clear. Increased awareness creates what psychologists call differentiation. You start to see the feeling of invisibility as something happening to you, not something that is you. This might sound subtle, but it's revolutionary. Once you can separate from the feeling, you have power over it. You can notice it without being consumed by it. The third strategy is connection, but not the kind you might think. Before you can truly connect with others, you need to reconnect with yourself. Mindfulness-based interventions, which have shown significant effectiveness in research, help you rebuild your relationship with yourself. You begin to notice yourself, to honor yourself, to remember that your inner world is valid and worthy of attention. And here's what the research consistently shows. As you develop a stronger internal relationship with yourself, your ability to tolerate vulnerability in external relationships increases. Additionally, psychologists recommend what's called relationship awareness. This means deliberately practicing presence and attention in your relationships. When you're with someone, actually be with them, put away distractions, notice them noticing you. Research shows that loneliness actually decreases people's sensitivity to commitment cues from others. So you need to consciously train yourself to notice when someone is showing you affection, commitment, or care. Your brain has learned to filter these out. You need to relearn how to receive them. There's also significant evidence supporting acceptance and commitment therapy, or a CT, for people struggling with chronic loneliness. This form of therapy helps you identify your values and then take action aligned with those values, even in the face of emotional discomfort. So, if you value genuine connection but you're terrified of vulnerability, a CT helps you take small steps toward vulnerability anyway. Not from a place of forcing yourself, but from a place of choosing what actually matters to you. And finally, and this is critical, therapy with a trained professional. The research is unambiguous on this. Trying to heal deep wounds from childhood neglect or rejection with friends alone is incredibly difficult. You need someone trained in trauma work to help you access and heal those wounded parts. This isn't weakness, this is intelligence. This is using the right tool for the job. Here's something that might give you hope. Your brain isn't static. Neuroscience has confirmed what we call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to literally rewire itself based on repeated experience. This means that the distorted patterns your brain has learned, the filters that screen out connection, the protections that have become prisons, these can all be changed. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes often working with a professional, but it's possible. Mindfulness-based interventions have shown moderate to large effect sizes in changing these patterns. People with depression, anxiety, trauma, people who have learned to be invisible, have reconnected with themselves and others through consistent practice and professional support. The transparency that once felt permanent can become translucent. The invisibility can become visibility. your brain can learn again how to receive love. The research is consistent. You are not fundamentally broken. You are not fundamentally unworthy of being seen. You have simply, intelligently, rationally learned a survival strategy that once protected you but now imprisons you. And survival strategies can be unlearned, protective walls can be softened, visibility can be rebuilt. If any of this has resonated with you, if you felt that crushing loneliness even in a crowded room, if you've noticed yourself becoming more transparent and less visible, if you've recognized that protective patterns that once saved you are now slowly suffocating you, I want you to know something. That feeling you have, it's real, it's valid, and it's treatable. Here, what I want you to do, first, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community here on Wired Logic HQ dedicated to understanding the psychology of human connection, to breaking through the barriers that keep us isolated, and to rebuilding our capacity for genuine intimacy. Every week, we dive deeper into the neuroscience and psychology of what it means to truly be seen in this world. Second, watch our related video on self-disclosure and vulnerability. We've got a full breakdown of the research on how opening up actually creates deeper connections instead of pushing people away. The link is in the description. Third, if you're struggling with chronic loneliness or the feeling of being invisible, please, and I mean this seriously, reach out to a mental health professional. The National Institute of Mental Health has resources available. Psychology Today's Therapist Finder is free to use. You deserve to be seen, and you deserve professional support in making that happen. And finally, in the comments below, I want to hear from you. Have you felt invisible? What was that experience like? How did you begin to reconnect with yourself and others? Or are you currently struggling with this and you just need to know you're not alone? This community is here for you. Let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Wired Logic HQ. Remember, your inner world is valid. You are worthy of being seen, and the work it takes to become visible again, that's the most worthwhile work you can possibly do. We'll see you in the next one.